quickly start with a photograph that I took in South Sudan. And I'm going to ask if Amanda can bring that up for me. So to those who are on the phone, I will describe this. It is a billboard that is around a traffic circle in Juba, South Sudan. And it is a photograph of giraffes running through the savannah. And what it says is, building peace for the people and wildlife of South Sudan. Building peace for the people and wildlife of South Sudan. There are a few things that are problematic in this message, and I'm just going to focus on one, and that is the preposition for, building peace for. And I offer this not to point fingers, but to indicate that I think this is a relic of the past. Again, I took this 5 years ago, and I don't think these messages are being put on billboards around the world anymore. I may be wrong, but I think we're in a new day. I think as an international community, we have moved past this belief that peace can be delivered from the outside. Peace, stability, and development have to grow from within. Delivering peace from the outside is about as possible as fixing someone else's marriage. You can support in a company. Obviously, if you're actively taking part in harming it, maybe there is something you can do directly. But otherwise, being a trusted and supportive presence, believing in their capacity and offering information and resource when asked are some of the most effective things that you can do. That is what's useful from the outside. And perhaps also being in solidarity as a learner who has one's own marriage that might need work as well. Because marriages and building peace are both related and very difficult. Because it's actually in the process of self-repair that capacity is built. It's in self-repair that leadership for sustainable peace and development is forged, and that structures such as an inclusive platform can be created that will continue to serve healthy conflict resolution and development into the future. It's where conflicts are resolved, and it's where relationships are developed. So knowing this, that peace can't be delivered from the outside, we're left with the challenge of what can be done by those outside of context to support places that are asking for support. How do we work as members of an international community that effectively supports peace and development, especially when most of the physical and belief systems we've inherited point to the outside-in delivery approach as the norm? So in many ways, we are working on turning the whole system inside out. And a lot of the language we use talks about top-down or bottom-up. And the vision that we work with is instead of top-down or bottom-up, but inside-out. And here is a metaphor that I am going to offer. We have nested mixing bowls. And this is really the vision that we're working towards. And what this is a whole, healthy, connected system. And at the very center, we have a community. And then we move outwards. And again, for those who are on the phone, I'm showing some colorful nested mixing bowls. So in the center, the smallest bowl is the community. And then outside the community is maybe the county, chiefdom. We have different language for different places. And then we might have a district or a state. We might have the national level outside of that, and then the international. And these different layers represent government, and they represent organizations. And so this vision offers this possibility that instead of all of these layers being disconnected, acting on each other, that everybody is in alignment to support the communities that are at the center. I mean, ultimately, all of our structures, all of our organizations should be supporting the well-being of healthy, whole, connected communities. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about inside out. So when we talk about locally led, we're really talking about community nested, which is a little bit more complicated. It's not just somebody in a context who is leading a process, but it is somebody who actually is engaging the community to figure out what it is that they want and how they can be supported in leading. So trying to work at this system has been what we have been doing with our partner, Fumble Talk in Sierra Leone, for the past 12 years. We've been working on building this aligned system with the communities at the center. As an international operating foundation, we have accompanied and funded Fumble Talk as they accompanied communities across Sierra Leone for 8 years. Staff worked with communities to identify the challenges and conflicts in their community, and they designed a process that involved an inclusive working group that led community reconciliation processes. The staff brought the process to the next community and asked if they wanted to engage. They brought very little financial resource, but instead worked with them over many months through consultations and learning sessions to have the hard conversations and include the diversity of the community and plan together. It became clear that the most important part of the work was not the reconciliation ceremonies and activities, but the work of the community working together and seeing what they were capable of doing collectively, which is something they did not see before. When Ebola arrived in Sierra Leone, the work grew to community Ebola response and planning for development, and in the process, creating permanent inclusive structures at the community level, and then also growing to the district level. It became clear that it couldn't just stop at the community level. There needed to be these inclusive district structures as well. So these inclusive platforms created an infrastructure or architecture for peace and development. So it's now taken 4 more years to work with the government of Sierra Leone on a policy framework at the national level, grounded in work in the communities and districts, that appears just now, within the last few weeks, to have the political will needed to move it forward to scale up the community-centered peace and development on a national scale. So what has this taken? Certainly more than I could talk about right now. But I want to focus on accompaniment. So Fumble Talk accompanied communities, Catalyst for Peace accompanied Fumble Talk. That involved building trust, planning together, offering feedback and linkages to other organizations and funders, staying connected with and in communication with the Fumble Talk leadership. We had conversations at least once a week. We were offering a sounding board and being in position as fellow learners. In addition to investing time and resource into accompaniment, what has been useful in supporting community-centered peace and development from our experience is a long-term funding horizon, a focus on one place, and heavy investment in process. And what I mean by process is investing in the time to build relationships, undertake problem and asset assessment. So I just want to underscore that point. Sasha mentioned it. That is a key piece, because folks around the world, even who appear to have nothing, have far more resource than they even know. And that is an experience that we have seen again and again. Inclusive planning and design, and integrating learning mechanisms. And throughout these 12 years, we have really heavily invested in learning spaces, knowing that as conflict is dynamic and emergent, so is building healthy communities. So the process has to be emergent as well. We integrated spaces for learning really throughout these 12 years, knowing that interventions had to be responsive to people's needs and what they were able to offer. We had invested in regular consultations between Fumble Talk and communities, where ongoing learning and problem solving was taking place. We invested in staff retreats. We invested in retreats with us and Fumble Talk. We invested in learning spaces between communities where a tremendous amount of learning happened. We used we invited very few international experts in this process. We found some of the best learning could happen between communities that had experienced this process and faced similar challenges. And then also learning spaces with international teams, also working on community-centered peace and development in other places. So this stuff is not easy. It's challenging, it's emergent, no matter how much we know, no matter what kind of skills we have. To actually deal with conflict and building healthy communities in real time, really it requires kind of like a situation room. You know, it's like, well, what's happening now? What do we need to do next? How do we stay keyed into the values that we have? So creating these kind of learning spaces has been really important. I recognize that as a small operating foundation, these practices have been possible for us. And I recognize that folks who are working in large institutions, particularly government, are not in the same position. And that's hard, right? So a long-term funding horizon, that would be great. I'm sure everybody on this call is thinking, but there are constraints. That long-term is really, really challenging. So what I would really encourage everyone to do, and not just government and large institutions, but really everyone in this international community, including organizations and private foundations, is to kind of put our heads up a little bit. And I'm showing us the red bowl, which is the largest one, which is the international community, to look around and see who else is in this international community. What are people doing? How can we work together? How can we stage our work? It maybe isn't a pooled fund, but maybe we can have staged processes where we can figure out who can go in and do that deep relationship building work initially, until there's something that's really viable within a community that is totally grounded, that's going to work. Maybe that's the point where a larger funding mechanism can come in, offer a larger amount of funding to scale it up. If it is starting from scratch, maybe the funding is directly going to a really good design process that is inclusive, that has the right people who are involved, not just the usual suspects, but a true diversity of people in communities who are coming together, and a process that doesn't just have a consultation move forward, but a process that has a consultation and then really asks the questions: are we all on board here? Is everybody in the room? Were the people in the room that were representing certain groups actually speaking? Because if they weren't, we don't have anything here. You know, we can't move forward, because that initial design stage, if it's not truly inclusive, if people cannot speak freely with one another, if there are key tensions in the room that are inhibiting folks from really bringing their whole selves into the process, you really don't have the foundation for building the process. So yes, so investing in that, investing in learning spaces, really at all levels, whether it's between communities, between countries, I think that can be incredibly helpful. And also engage in the learning process, be involved in that. We're all learning here. This is a huge curve as we try to figure out how do we operate in a really different way than we have for many, many years.